This is a moment that I bring it back to really feel this is a leadership challenge when it comes to trust, ethics, and capability, and ultimately your culture. And how are you bringing that culture and how you do things, those unspoken norms, and bringing AI into that fold.
So
here we are.
Another episode.
Back at it.
Are we ready for it?
Yeah, ready.
Great. I think technically our 6th episode. We learned a lot from our first 5. Some topics landed, some less so.
Great feedback, great follow-up questions.
For sure. I think one of them that really stood out to us was that the episode we did on AI with OK and Israel. Just confirming that it was and is still a very relevant topic for most people out there, most leaders out there. And in that episode, we mostly kind of honed in on like tech versus human. What is it capable of? Is it really kind of starting to act like a human being? Mm-hmm. But what was missing for some, or like a follow-up question, was around what does it mean for me as a teammate, for me as a leader in an organization, for my business. Right. So I think it could be interesting to kind of dive a little further into that and to just reference where we are today. But what I start noticing is that the narrative is changing a little bit in various ways.
Yeah.
And that I find it often hard to kind of distill, as it sometimes feels a bit conflicting in ways. So on the one hand, what I saw in research that GBK and Wharton did was that, and that's confirming what we say, like there's no denying, overall, the weekly usage of AI, or the people that use AI on a weekly basis, has doubled over the last year. So from 37%, it went up to 75% or something, which, again, validates the point. It's there. Then on the one hand, you see kind of these big headlines around mostly big tech companies or larger corporations that seem to be all in, right? There was this article in Business Insider that mentioned that OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank together are pouring another $500 billion into data centers, AI data centers. So, I mean, if that's not a showcase of being all in, I think it is going to like follow the money. They believe in it big time. But then it also feels like we're a bit in this time where some are publicly calling others out on using AI, mostly kind of on the social platforms, I feel.
Like AI shaming.
I've even seen AI bans, like in schools or in organizations. There's starting to be more talk around policies and how do we protect ourselves against it. So there's also this kind of more hesitant side to it still, which maybe is more like in the general public or in the public sector. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just the other side of the coin still, of like, how comfortable are we in trusting it? There are risks, and I think we also debated that.
I agree with you. I think this is the messy middle we talk about.
Yeah.
But I also think we're now moving into that piece of what's next. And maybe the question is more, how do leaders lead their teams through this version of change?
Right. Yeah. And that kind of brings to mind the classic adoption curve, right? With all new technology, there's always this phase where there are some people that talk about it already. Others are not even aware that it is happening. And everyone seems to be at a various stage, I think. But the majority for AI still in that messy middle.
Yeah. But the conversation is really about the people element as we're getting, you reference that adoption curve. Like now that we're getting to the mass majority of people, to me, it really becomes a people question.
Interesting.
And a people leadership question, a human question. That's the side that I'm really fascinated with. And not to oversimplify it, is it just the next version of change? right? That how we work, how we lead, how we learn is facing. And, like, not to go on a change management train by any means too much today, but it like makes me think of, as people, when you're going through change, this Haudenosaunee kind of phrase or worldview that I love referencing when it comes to change of change happens. It's like a river. It flows. It is going to move, continue to move forward. Sometimes it's stagnant. It's a bit stagnant, but it's generally always moving forward. And in change, do you want to be the river, the rock, or the shore? So do you want to be the rock that resists it and kind of plunks yourself in the middle of it and maybe gets left behind? Do you want to be a shore that you're a participant and influence it a little bit and help it bend and shape? Or are you going to be the river and just go along with the ride, right? So to me, I'd love to further the conversation to what's the people side of this and how do us as leaders, we've been talking about this with our own company and our, the folks that we work with. We've heard it from our clients and we heard it from our listeners on our last episode. But now what's that people element or that leadership challenge that comes with it?
Yeah. So bringing it from tech to people, and to your point, it is change management and change management in the broadest sense, right? It is not only about adopting change, it is kind of how do we change as humans and how we interact and work with one another. Yeah, so we mentioned it, right? That adoption curve or change curve, that does not necessarily only apply to tech. But for those of our listeners who have not heard of it or are less familiar with it, it's a concept that was introduced in the 60s by a guy named Everett Rogers. And I think it has seen some evolution since. But it is this imperfectly shaped bell curve that basically tells you that with every change that kind of happens in the world, there's usually a minority, and like a tiny, tiny minority that would be considered as like the innovators. Those are way ahead of the curve, way ahead of everyone. They are playing around with things that are like never heard of by the majority of people, right? So the true early innovators driving it. So curious, kind of in your river analogy, what's driving that river? Because that would be the innovator. Then you have the early adopters, which is a bit of a bigger group, say 15, 16, 70% of people usually. And that is, I always see that group as a bit of a bridge, kind of. They start, it's a bigger group that starts adopting it. They don't feel like as foreign as those innovators. They are able to kind of test it, bring it to the real world applications and influence the people around them because they are more in touch with that day-to-day reality. Then there is the pragmatists. That's kind of where it really starts hitting kind of that the masses. So that is the middle group, the biggest group, the top of the bell curve. And then followed by the skeptics, who are usually a bit later in adopting it and resisting it at first, pushing back, challenging it, mostly focusing on the risks. And then the traditionalists, those are the last people standing. Kind of, they resist it until they really can't anymore. And I think it is interesting. I'm curious for your thoughts on it. Like, where on that curve are we currently with AI? Where are you personally? What are you seeing around you? Where are we? And one thing that I kind of want to just plug there is, I think, and maybe this is just giving away my thoughts around it, I feel like we're still focusing on those two extremes. Like, on the one hand, we're talking a lot about kind of how it's going to change the world and it's this big thing, but still a bit foreign. We don't know what it is. So it feels in that like early adoption innovation stage. Whereas on the other side, there is the true skeptics and they're focusing on the risks. And that's kind of where the banning and the shaming happens. And I sometimes feel like maybe we're overlooking this massive, messy middle where people are not skeptic enough to really see the risks. But not advanced enough to really unlock the true potential. So curious for your thoughts and also like your own reflections on where do you fit?
Well, I reference that curve in a lot of my conversations and work that we do. And it does make me happy to see that the change curve has changed over time. It would be pretty funny if we're still calling the traditionalists laggards. But so a few updates.
Who's not offended by that?
Yeah. Traditionalists, that sounds so much better. But yeah. And, for me, I agree. Like people do get focused on the extremes because sometimes they're more clear on what they like, don't like, what they need, what their preferences are, what their viewpoints are. And what this curve usually indicates is that those folks are pretty solid in their preferences and are going to do whatever they're going to do. And there's not no room to influence, but you're going to get incremental versus that larger majority in the group. And to focus efforts there. But it's harder because it's a bigger group of people. And to your point, I think you used the word, it's a bit messier. It's less clean cut, right, on what you do. But I personally would say, like, putting myself in those shoes of what you were just describing and thinking about the work we're doing at Sidekick, because we fit into this bucket and are figuring it out as we go, right? Yeah. But I personally would say in most things, I'm like an early adopter. I'm like, let's figure it out. We'll tinker around, enough to try things, but not enough to kind of be dangerous. So you need to kind of rein yourself in. And that's a bit of what we've been trying to do at a Sidekick with our team and understanding like, where is everybody on there? And me, I tend to move fast, which I know and can have cause whiplash for some people for sure, which I need to slow down. But you need to like respect where everybody is and meet people where they're at on the curve. But I think that's what we've tried to do at Sidekick and is a good step that maybe folks want to think about, right? Yep. If in your own situation, your own team with your peers, if you're managing a team, leading an organization, like what does your culture say about where folks might fall there or where as an organization you might fall? Do you have one that tests and experiments more? You might be on the other side. Are you one that is more grounded and just naturally regulations and rules and there's more guidelines that bound your work on a day-to-day? So you need to consider that.
Yeah. And I think if I look at our own team, like I would say we have a pretty progressive team overall. Yeah, I agree. And to your point of experimentation, I think it started with everyone just doing their own little experiments. And then at some point, kind of when we were starting to bring that together and you were spearheading or leading that, because it, I don't know if it felt like that for you, but it had the risk of like running out of control a little bit. Like everyone was doing their own thing everywhere, which then kind of drove the need for like, okay, let's maybe bring this together. Let's make some strategic decisions around what do we use it for? What tools do we use? How do we make sure that we kind of assess the quality of things?
Well, and at the end of the day, we're in consulting and the realization business. So trust and credibility and privacy in our work is really important. So it does run that risk of getting out of control.
So I think that's a part of what we did. And I'm aligned. I would put you in the early adopters, and in some parts I would put myself kind of a little bit later than that. I was definitely not the first to experiment with AI. But a fast follower, I would say. And then once I got hooked, I start seeing the potential, right? So I'm now more looking into what it could be. So like, how can we, AI is obviously kind of impacting knowledge-based work a lot. And if I go to like, what is the work that we do? It is a lot of knowledge, experience, frameworks that we have like in our back pockets and we pull whenever we feel like it's applicable. So we've also been looking into like, how do we use that? Can we bundle that? Can we productize that? How can we kind of AI enable what we do today in some sort of a product that might change the world one day?
Totally.
Then at the same time, I'm also every day almost kind of confronted with the limitations. And admittedly, that could be the limitations of AI currently.
Or you.
Or my own limitations. Fair. Exactly. Like, I don't know what I don't know. I have this big idea of like what I think it should be capable of. Well, is it? And I don't always have the resources or the skill sets or the knowledge to properly assess that. And a concept that we talked about in our previous episode on how human can AI be is that human in the loop concept, which I really took to heart, because in everything that we do, like more in the marketing realm, copywriting, writing thing, having AI help us do that, accelerate that. And what I said, I'm confronted also with it's not where I think it could be. So it always still involves me to put the right prompts in there, think about it, critically think about what is it that I need, that I want from it. And then also the outcome still requires refinements and things like that. So messy middle, I would say. And then I'll give you 2 examples that made me chuckle again. There was this, like, on LinkedIn, someone reached out to me and a million other people probably, but would you be interested in writing a book? And we can help you with that. Disclaimer, we will not use AI. And then I was like, well, you use that as a selling point. I think that's dumb. Why aren't you using AI?
Yeah.
Right? So that also, again, shows various different positions on the curve. And then more internally, we were also working on improving our, like, Kretz deck and PowerPoint and what that looked like from a design perspective. And then I was chatting with one of our colleagues, and I was like, are we going to use AI to improve this? And then the response was, no, it's an actual designer, as in, like, almost defensive. And again, I was like, well, why wouldn't we use AI, right? Like, so 2 just kind of examples where I've personally ran into, like, oh, apparently we are at different kind of stages of adaptation of it, right?
Interesting. I see where you're going with that. So where you're now finding you're moving further ahead on the curve. These interactions are with people that may be not at the same place, right? And coming through it, which is really interesting. Yeah. And I don't think you're alone in that, right? And taking it out of kind of our day-to-day work with our team and our colleagues. I think of the folks that we get to partner with, our clients every single day. And this is like the $1 million kind of question. Not one conversation goes by that this doesn't come up from either a strategic perspective, bigger, overarching, what are we doing, to a more day-to-day ways of working. How can this improve? To, a lot of questions. And I can see folks are concerned, around the ethics and the security and privacy of things. So, questions I've heard, I'm sure you've heard something similar, is, do we even allow AI in our workflows?
Yeah.
Oh, allow. Okay. Yeah. Interesting question. And I get if you're a big, huge company like that with thousands of employees, like that's a big thing. We're talking a team of 7, right? Yeah. Like it's just a different ball game. There's that, and this is like the human in the loop concept we heard before. Like, are people just copying and pasting? How do we use it to be a sparring partner? What's that critical value and lens we're putting on it? And then there's a lot of like, how and what do we do? How does this affect our people? How do we upskill? Unfortunately, we see headlines of big companies doing layoffs. Like there was that one announcement from the Accenture CEO who's like, shape up or ship out if you're not on the AI train. There's a lot of, again, to your point, extremes. But, this is a moment that I bring it back to really feel this is a leadership challenge when it comes to trust, ethics, and capability, and ultimately your culture. And how are you bringing that culture and how you do things, those unspoken norms, and bringing AI into that fold.
Yeah. So it does start to feel like we're shifting on that curve, even compared to our last episode on AI, right? It's all the questions that you just brought up from what we're hearing around us are way more people focused, and like, how do we make this work? How do we work with it, not against it? And not so much of like, what is it capable of? So like we've shifted on that curve. So I think the whole concept of that adoption curve, change curve, and where people are at, I think for our listeners is a good moment to just pause and reflect. Like, where are you on that curve? Where's your team? And then most importantly, like, how does that match up? And how are you leading your team through that curve?
Yeah. Your customers.
And your customers. Yeah.
There's an article in HBR about boards and like you really think about every person you interact with directly or indirectly, and where are they at?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it, again, reiterates to me that this is evolving from not just being a tech challenge, but like a people piece and really a leadership challenge for a bunch of people, whether you're an executive at a company, a middle manager, a team lead, or just peers working together, on a team project. Like that really plays a role. So leadership challenge.
Yeah,
for sure.
So no longer CTO and IT guys or
go figure it out.
It kind of hits everyone, which again is that middle majority.
Yeah. And I do think, we are seeing, at least in the conversations that I was mentioning before, I'm not having those conversations with the CTOs, the CIOs, it's folks who lead a team, that are producing a lot of work, big teams, small teams. It's folks who are some at that middle management, executive level that they're just trying to navigate. Like, what do I do? What should I even be asking? And, executives are getting more involved. And some of our clients, we are seeing that AI is starting to be embedded as like a strategy, and folks are seeing that need for urgency with this change. And in my experience in these conversations and seeing it come to life, it's really pairing that vision from the executives, which you may have a say in that, you may not have a say in it, but what is that vision, and that it's tied to your culture and your values to truly be adopted properly.
Yeah. And I think from a like culture perspective, there's also, or I don't know if it's culture or just kind of human nature, really, like the hesitation is also still there, right? And has become a lot around like replacing jobs or changing jobs. And they hit people really hard. Like personally, it's kind of in the foundational universal human needs. Like, will I be able to take care of my family if I lose my job?
Yep.
Will I still have value in this society? Who am I if all of that, what I loved doing, is now being done by AI? So those are true concerns that we can also not like forego. So curious what you're seeing around you. Like we already talked a little bit about the questions that people ask, customers, peers, clients. But what are some great examples as to like how to adapt it, in how to align it with your business strategy, with your culture?
I immediately come to a few of our clients, which I won't be too revealing, but there's an organization we work with that does professional services, let's say across the country. And I think in the professional services, it's fairly regulated. And it's interesting that their senior team said, like, we have a real opportunity here.
Yeah.
There is an opportunity. There wasn't a mandate of something, but it was like, there is an opportunity here to better deliver on our very purpose-driven mission and better deliver for our clients. They weren't admitting they knew what it was, but let's go figure it out, and created this like safe space for their team, various people across the country, to start to experiment a little bit, poke around, looking. They created a few little working committees, which was very in line with their culture, and started to poke around, came across some roadblocks pretty quickly and addressed those risks around security and where the servers had to be located. That mattered. But it was really that balance of like setting a vision or direction, or communicating there's an opportunity, and giving that permission to step into this territory, especially in I wouldn't say they're regulated, but there's a lot of considerations on the work that they do. And then there was this culture of experimentation that started to bubble up from the ground up, and use cases, and then people saying, oh, this is great, it saved this. And I was able, and then, oh, I'm going to do that too. Yeah. But there's this piece in the middle that started to form around guardrails, ways of working, those new norms forming, but also a commitment to upskilling.
Right.
And realizing where their team was on the adoption curve, even just generationally speaking, they had folks that were older, like ourselves included. It's not like they were a bunch of, yes, I know we're older now, like Gen Zs. I don't even know if alphas are in the workplace yet. That there was an upskilling, and they were willing to commit to invest in that development to upskill and train their team. And it's really come together beautifully. Like people take, at least the bits that I've seen, like true ownership over in their day-to-day, their involvement and bettering their work and their team's work and sharing. Yeah.
So I think there are a couple of components in there of, well, first of all, acknowledging that there is an opportunity, seeing the opportunity from a business perspective, creating the guardrails. So, and then the culture of experimentation, I always kind of translate that into like, you're given a sandbox, right? Like it has clear boundaries, but aside from that, you can do whatever you want. There's the bottom up component in it, I think. So it's not a like, and this is what we're going to do with AI, but more so like, here are some guardrails, go at it, have at it. And then it creates this sharing culture almost naturally, right?
And I will say, like, we're a smaller organization, so recognize our ability to be agile and nimble is a bit easier. The organization I described is probably a medium-sized organization, a little bit more agility and speed. And then we've worked with large ones that it's clearly that vision's been set, and now people are like, it's a big change, right?
Yeah.
To bring thousands of people along
on that.
Yeah. A big change.
Yeah.
So I don't want to be like, oh, do these things. And it's so easy. Like there's a lot of pressure and weight that comes with that otherwise.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned around the willingness to invest and upskill and train people, I think is a shift that we see across the board. The research that I referenced earlier from GBK and Wharton also showed that more money is being invested in AI, but not just in tech or tools. Mostly, actually, and that's the main shift over the last couple of months, is that the investment is going to training, onboarding.
So when you look at like dollars spent by an organization, there's this tip that's happened from investing in tools, technology
tech.
to the people. Oh, cool. That's nice to hear.
And I think that's an early sign of that, or maybe not even an early sign, but a sign of that narrative changing from fear of AI replacing and taking all of our jobs to repositioning it as a transition. Curious for your thoughts on what does that require from us as leaders, like in terms of skills? Is that and also kind of referencing our like human-centric leadership potentially, like what are some of those skills? Like it feels like curation, influencing, facilitation are some of the skills that could become even more valuable in this world where we're navigating AI. How you look at leadership?
Yeah, it's funny as we've been talking in the back of my head, I've been thinking about our human-centered leadership episode and kind of holding that balance of empathy and accountability, right? So, how do you create a culture that has a bit of a safe space to experiment and share and meet people where they're at and realize, understand where they're on the curve and kind of give space for everybody to come along. But also there's an accountability. You have to deliver value to your clients, your services, depending on where you are, your industry, the sector, the government, the world, you have to respect that responsibility that you have. So there's definitely balancing that. But I do think, as a leader, some of those skill sets is first being curious, being really curious about what this could do, what are the possibilities, having that open mind. And being willing to admit when you don't know everything. I do think, I mentioned empathy, and I think that's a big piece of meeting people where they're at on this curve, both people on your team, but also your clients and how that all comes together. But this tipping point on upskilling, like I think there's a big capacity building piece. As a leader, how do you facilitate that? How do you guide yourself, your team? Like, and this is quite be a bit vulnerable, like what I think about a lot of kind of bringing these all together of this empathy and accountability, being curious, but like at the end of the day, We have been hired to do the best that we possibly can for our clients.
Yep.
What role does AI play in that? Are we playing too much and futzing and wasting time when that could have been spent? So it's all of those things. But I really think there's an empathy piece, a curiosity piece, creating that sandbox to experiment, but also being accountable and respecting the responsibility that you do have.
Yeah. Yeah. And to that point of vulnerability, I think, and that's for me personally too, there is definitely a shift of like being the person who always has all the answers and knows everything, to much more like, I think goal leaders need to shift or will be better off if they shift to more of that facilitation. Like it's going to be too much, too overwhelming, too big for anyone to know it all. So it is that vulnerability, to your point of like admitting what you don't know, but facilitating the group through it.
And maybe there's someone with you in your team, like in our case, who has a bit of a passion and leans more into this space that can help be a bit of a lead for you and doesn't have to be you.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So we've been talking about ourselves, reflecting on our position, the adoption curve. So that would also be my kind of initial thought on like for our listeners, what can we give them in terms of like what how to make this tangible? We're all living it, we're all breathing it. Mm-hmm. What can I do? And my first thing would still be going back to that adoption curve, really kind of reflecting on where are you, but also plotting out your team. And I think that exercise alone will already reveal a lot. And maybe you do it with your team, right? Where everyone does their own personal assessment and just kind of reflect on it. See where that conversation takes you.
Yep. I like that one. Always a big fan, like I said, of meeting people where they're at first. And then I think second, there's a piece around, so how does it impact your work, right? And depending on, your role of influence and kind of span of influence or whatever the term is, control, I forget the term, but it's more around, is AI a strategy for you? Is it an enabler? How does it fit into what you do? How does it accelerate you towards your vision? Your key differentiator, the one thing you do really well as an organization or even as a department in a bigger organization, and really aligning that, because I do hear a lot of, we now have an AI strategy where, okay, from our previous episode, his voice goes around in my head of like, well, no, you've always had like a digital or more recently a digital or a technical. This is just another element in the toolkit. So is it really a strategy? Is it another enabler? Is it another tool?
Yeah.
In an organization, General Motors, doing their supply chain efficiency, they had one digital tool that minimized errors. Now they use AI to minimize their errors, and it's doing it X times better, right? Or schools, there's a lot of post-secondary institutions that some are shying away from it. Some are like hanging their hat on it, and it's truly being like one of their differentiators. So you can see how it is adopted in different places, but at the end of the day, what role is AI? Is it a strategy, a tool, an enabler for you for your team, for the organization, depending on the scale?
Yeah. Those examples actually trigger another one for me, like an architectural design firm that we've been working with. And they've set out to really kind of centralize all of that information that goes into like a construction project, which has set them up to produce or kind of build buildings way faster and with more accurate information in it. But one of the things there is that they still need to kind of obviously comply with building code. And I don't know if you've ever read through the building code. But
no, I haven't. It's on my bucket list.
1,000,000 pages. And to make sure that everything is accurately kind of reflecting that, that's kind of where they've been implementing their first kind of AI experiments, is how can we kind of make that connection and not literally have to go through the building code or rely on what you still remember from reading it, but literally kind of accelerate that connection, right? Still in line with their being able to build faster and more accurately and produce more accurate drawings. Just an accelerator. So I think that's another example like there.
Came from a curiosity
For sure.
No one wants to read that, like a pain point, and then someone tested it.
Yeah.
Tried it out.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And then I think the third point that comes to mind is what we talked about kind of closer to the end is, as a leader, adopt or accept that role as a curator, a facilitator, and not necessarily an expert. So still use your judgment, your empathy, your critical thinking to ask the right questions to facilitate the implementation. But, well, first of all, don't do it all by yourself, but also don't expect yourself to know everything. And there was this quote that I came across from the CPO of Zappi. It's a marketing insights platform that really kind of summarized that for me. And it said, leading change is a constant between strategy, structure, and flexibility. It's about the poetry and the plumbing.
Very cool. I like that. Yeah. So maybe on that note, I feel like, again, as we do, we've ping-ponged around here a little bit, but kind of leaving with those three maybe tips or, things that our listeners could do with it. Maybe we bring it home now of we've gone from a meet people where they're at and that adoption curve or the change curve, and don't get overly focused. Obviously, don't disregard the extremes, but that middle messy part, which is the imperfect bell curve part of it, that messy middle is where maybe the real opportunity is, and evolve from being solely a tech problem to this is a people opportunity as well. And it kind of makes me chuckle of the term human in the loop kind of has a double meaning, where before the human in the loop was to help strengthen the solution from a technical or output from a technical perspective. But how are you keeping your humans in the loop of your AI adoption?
I see it.
Ding, ding, ding. There we go.
Yeah. So AI doesn't lead, people do.
Yeah.
Really, as leaders, keep that focus on leading your team through it and do it together is ultimately what will probably define whether AI will be another thing or a distraction or the driver of real momentum. To summarize kind of those three things that we just kind of just listed there as takeaways is assess where your team is on that curve, align your AI to your business strategy. Don't make it a standalone thing, and lead as a curator or facilitator. Don't lose that human skill in judgment or critical thinking. So to make it smaller for our listeners, we always like to kind of give you a bit of a challenge, something that you can take away, think about tomorrow. If I had to choose one thing, I would really start with that adoption curve. Reflect for yourself, map your team out on it, maybe do a fun working session with your team, and just let that conversation happen.
I love that challenge. And maybe I'll add a new piece of a little inspiration to leave off with, which came from a workshop we were leading around change adoption specifically. So if you bear with me, I really liked it. Yeah. And we have to give Rosie on our team credit. She was the one that brought this forward. I was like, curious. Oh, this is so good. So it's empty your mind, be formless, shapeless, like water. You put water into a cup, it becomes a cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes a bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes a teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. From Bruce Lee. So on that note,
I love it.
This leadership challenge, be water.
Be water. With that, we've come to the end of the episode. But the end of the episode is always the start of something more. We hope you were able to take something away from this episode. It helped you think about things a little differently. And as we said, us too, we are facilitators. We're curious. We're not know-it-alls. So we would love to continue this conversation. Follow us on LinkedIn. Feel free to comment, reach out to us. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your experiences and build this journey further together.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.